The factors that have contributed to the turmoil that we're experiencing right now. I mentioned a couple. There's also the decline of institutions. And that includes, and David Lenhart points this out, he includes religious institutions, churches. He says churches. He leaves out, I think, mosques and synagogues. Because I don't believe that mosques and synagogues, the religious gathering points for Muslims and Jews, has adopted in this country, a theory or an advocacy for chaos and destruction and hatred and contempt and lies and deceit. Now, I don't know. I don't attend a mosque. I don't attend a synagogue. But from the people I know who are of those two religions, who do attend those places of worship, I don't hear any of that. I hear it, though, coming, and I'm very aware of where it comes from, and that is from the Christian churches. So the decline of institutions is what David Lenhart points out, including churches. One that I am familiar with is labor unions, although they are attempting now, in this time, to reassert themselves as the force for the development of the middle class, of the raising of living standards that labor unions have always been, until they were beat into the ground by the capitalist pigs back in the 70s and 80s. Now they're making a comeback, I hope. So you have churches, labor unions, once dominant local employers. Here in Atlanta, for example, there were two huge department stores that had been here for decades before I ever got here. But they were here when I first moved here to stay. When I came here in 1970, 71, downtown Atlanta had, first of all, Atlanta did not have the massive shopping malls that developed over the next 50 years. But there was Rich's and Davison's. Kind of the equivalent of Macy's and Bloomingdale's in New York City at the time. Maybe Bloomingdale's a little bit too upscale. Macy's and what was the other big retail outlet in New York? Oh, well. Anyway, Rich's and Davison's at the time. And it was owned by local people. And then all of a sudden, those two massive department stores were gone. And in place of them, we had Macy's and Walmart. Neither of which is a local employer. Neither of which is a dominant local employer, which is one of the things that David Lenhart says, the decline of which has resulted in a lot of frustration by us, by Americans. I can remember when if you went to Rich's and bought a product, bought an item, took it home, didn't like it, you could take it back and instantly you just get a refund. Rich's and Davison's had their own credit cards. And everything was just very simple. And you knew that you were dealing with local companies. That's gone. That's gone. I only point those two out because they stood out in my experience of Atlanta for maybe the first 10 years I was here. And then all of a sudden, poof, they were gone. They were gone. So this decline of institutions, and I agree with David Lenhart about this, has left a lot of us feeling untethered, unmoored. And these aging political leaders, you know who I'm talking about, including President Biden, they have failed to groom strong successors. Who's going to take the place of this generation? Jack it off Jim Jordan? Oh my God. This is the inheritor of the mantle of Ronald Reagan. I'm not praising Reagan, trust me. But Jim Jordan? Oh my God. Scalise? What is Scalise's first name? Oh, for Christ's sake. Steve Scalise. You know what was said one time of Steve Scalise? This is before he got shot when he was playing baseball a few years back. But it was said of Steve Scalise that he was a Klansman without the robe. You know, he's from where? Louisiana? Is that where he's from? He was a Klansman without the robe. Now, he has covered that up fairly adroitly over the past 25 years. But it's the truth. I mean, Steve Scalise is not about equal protection under law, equal justice, equal opportunity. He's not about that. Not even fucking close to that. And Jim Jordan, this little Nazi twerp who worships at the Church of Trump. These are the successors that the Christian Fascist Party has determined are the ones they want. If that weren't the case, they wouldn't be running for Speaker of the House, would they? Of course not. Which brings me to the single largest source of the chaos in this country. And you know what it is as well as I do. It is the rotting corpse of the Republican Party, out of which has emerged Christian fascism. Here it is. Now, the single largest source of political chaos in this country is the Christian Fascist Party. David Lenhart calls it the Republican Party. And he points out that he doesn't say that lightly, because he says that there's plenty of evidence that the Democratic Party also has problems. Well, of course it does. Any political party, especially one like the Democratic Party that is truly interested in democracy, is going to have some internal issues about how to get there. First of all, how do we get there? Do we walk? Do we crawl? Do we run? Do we push everybody out of our way who is interfering with the move to democracy? What do we do? The Democratic Party has, for example, struggled to come up with effective policies on COVID school closures. Now that after it became a fait accompli and we all had to deal with it, we had to deal with the fact that our school-aged children were no longer going to a building at 8 o'clock in the morning and being released from that building at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had to adjust, and we didn't do a very good job of it, did we? Now it turns out that some of the experts have said that the closing of the schools was not a good decision. But who knew in May of 2020, when all of a sudden this pandemic, this virus, is rampant across the planet, and people are dropping like flies, hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands and then millions of people. We only had one model to follow, and that was the pandemic, the flu pandemic of 1918, 1919. And if you look back at the old pictures, you'll see quarantine. You'll see people wearing face masks. But once again, the Christian Fascist Party, when this came up, and the leadership of this country, the Democratic leadership, said, okay, we've got to avoid crowds. We've got to stop touching things. We've got to stop coughing in public. Some of which was good advice, some of which didn't make any sense, but nobody knew what we were dealing with. So the Democratic leadership, for the most part, said this is what we have to do. And I'm talking about on a local level, state level, city level, county level, because the dirty, rotten bastard Donald Trump, he wouldn't even own up to the fact that something was going on because he was afraid it would make him look bad. So hundreds of thousands of people in this country had to sacrifice their lives to his fucking ego. That is precisely what happened. I don't give a shit what your political point of view is. That is what happened. Oh, see, I'm starting to wave my arms and get like Joe Scarborough. So who knew what was the right way to go with the COVID policies? But in that confusion, the Christian fascists in general, but Christian fascists specifically, I've come to learn, maybe you have too, never let a chaotic situation like that go to waste. They will use it just like Trump uses it, just like Trump has always used it. So the next thing you know, we have insane, screaming parents, most of them, at school board meetings, screeching about, you're not going to take away my freedom. My child is not going to wear a mask. Fuck you. I'm not going to happen. I'll kill you if you try to make it happen. That kind of stuff. What kind of bullshit is that? But it's what we had to deal with. And then there was illegal immigration, undocumented people, and capitalism wants them. The capitalist system in this country wants immigrants. This country is all about immigrants. I mean, the people who were here originally were eliminated, pushed onto reservations, murdered with diseases, killed with slaughtering. This whole country is immigrant. And not just the hardcore capitalists, but business owners, people who owned maybe restaurants, auto repair shops, local yard services, all sorts of jobs that a lot of Americans look at in a very demeaning way. But the small business owner said, we've got to have workers, farm workers, factory workers. Do you know what the ratio of immigrants to native born is in chicken rendering plants? Neither do I. But I will guarantee you, since some of the biggest chicken rendering plants in America are here in Georgia, that the ratio of immigrants, legal or documented or not documented, is beside the point, is probably 100 to 1 against native born people. Because a lot of native born Americans, go into a chicken rendering plant? Not me, bro. I'll go, I'll go deal reefer before I do that. So the immigration problem. Yes, our immigration system is broken into a million pieces, but you can't lay that at the foot of Joe Biden, or the feet of Joe Biden. This is a situation that has been building in this country for decades. And it finally came to a head. And then when you have a political party and the head of that party, like this filthy pig bastard Donald Trump, exploit that issue. Before he was even president, when he was running for Congress, or running for the presidency, talking about how Barack Obama wasn't a citizen, talking about how the immigrants were rapists and murderers and just filthy, dirty, rotten people. I wonder who said that about his goddamn Nazi father and his grandparents when they came here from Germany. Huh? Anybody say that about his people? And then, of course, you have a lot of working class voters who consider the Democratic Party to be disdainful of them, to be willing to ignore what the working class in this country wants. And to a degree, that has been true. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You have a Democratic Party machine in a city, and the next thing you know, it's running very efficiently, but running efficiently for the people at the top, the people who are pouring the oil into the machine. And those of us down here, the working class Democrats, were just ignored until 2 weeks before an election. And then all of a sudden, the Democratic Party chieftains are all over the neighborhood. Hey, look what we're going to do. We're having a fish fry. We're having a chicken fry. Hey, anybody want free watermelon? Hey, come on by the picnic. And we had so much of that from the Democratic Party that so many people just said, well, fuck it. I may be a Democrat at heart, but I'm just not going to vote that way anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to vote at all. Or you had Ronald Reagan. Remember Reagan Democrats? Do you remember that awful, horrible term? Reagan Democrats? Yeah, well. And because the Democratic Party has been disdainful to a large extent of white voters, guess what? That attitude now has recently spread to voters of color who are also beginning to say, wait a fucking minute. Well, why? Just because I'm a black man, a black woman, why am I supposed to vote Democratic? I'm not going to vote for these racist son of a bitches in the Republican Party, but why am I supposed to vote Democratic? What are they doing for me, for my neighborhood? What are they doing for the organizations in which I'm a member and that are desperate for funds, desperate for support? What are they doing for my city, for my little business? What are they doing, the Democrats, to help my kids get educated? Well, when the answer comes back, not a whole goddamn lot of anything, eventually you have people who normally would support the Democratic Party, the so-called working class. I don't care if we're black or white or Latino, it doesn't make any difference. But those of us who are in the working class, we're not going to be millionaires ever. So how long do we accept from the party that has been our way out of this morass into a solid middle-class existence? How long are we going to accept them ignoring us before we say, well, okay, the system is not responsive to me any longer. I really don't have a voice. Then comes the decision to just bail out of the whole system. And into that vacuum, invariably, into that vacuum comes fascism, especially when you have a twisted psychopath like Donald Trump promoting it. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.